It began with a warning that felt far more like a threat than a reminder, the kind that immediately tells you something is deeply wrong. The envelope was stamped with authority, slid under my door as if secrecy mattered more than transparency. Inside was a notice accusing me of violations so vague they could apply to almost anyone, yet the penalties were specific, escalating, and urgent. That single document marked the moment my peaceful life in a quiet neighborhood began to unravel. For years, the Homeowners Association had been an invisible presence. Dues were paid automatically, lawns stayed trimmed, and the rules were rarely discussed. The neighborhood looked perfect on the surface, a picture of suburban order designed to reassure buyers that stability lived behind every door. I believed that image completely, until the association decided to remind me who truly held power. The first fine was small, almost laughable, justified by an alleged landscaping issue that didn't exist. I assumed it was a mistake and responded calmly, submitting photos and requesting clarification. No response came. Instead, another notice arrived, citing a different rule, followed by another fine. The amounts grew faster than the explanations shrank. Each letter carried an unspoken message. Compliance mattered more than truth. Soon, the tone shifted from corrective to punitive. Words like non-compliance, enforcement, and legal action appeared more frequently. The associate wasn't trying to fix a problem, it was asserting control. When I asked for the governing documents to better understand the rules I was accused of breaking, the delay stretched on for weeks. What finally arrived was incomplete and inconsistent. Pages missing and amendments unexplained. That was when the pattern became clear. The HOA was not enforcing established rules known to homeowners. It was selectively applying authority through documents most people never questioned. And it had grown comfortable doing so. Neighbors began to distance themselves. Friendly waves stopped. Conversations ended when I approached. Fear travels faster than facts in communities like this, and the HOA had mastered the art of quiet intimidation. Everyone knew that pushing back came with consequences, and no one wanted to be next. The real escalation came when a notice claimed I had violated a recently updated policy, one I had never been informed of. According to the association, the update had been properly approved and distributed. None of that was true. I checked every official communication channel, every posted notice, and every public filing. There was no record of approval, no homeowner vote, and no legal amendment. The association had crossed a line it assumed no one would notice. Instead of paying, I started documenting every letter, every envelope, every inconsistency. I requested meeting minutes and financial statements. I researched state laws governing homeowners associations and discovered requirements the HOA had ignored for years. Elections had not been held properly. Board members had overstayed their terms. Financial transparency was non-existent. The more I uncovered, the more aggressive the association became. Late fees were added to fines I still disputed. Threats of liens appeared in writing. The possibility of foreclosure, once unthinkable, was now casually mentioned as a consequence of non-payment. It was an attempt to scare me into silence. What the HOA didn't realize was that fear had already been replaced by clarity. As I pressed further, the responses grew sloppy. Notices contradicted earlier claims. Rule numbers changed between letters. The association accidentally referenced internal documents they had never shared publicly. Their power trip was unraveling under scrutiny. Behind the scenes, the board was panicking. They had built their authority on the assumption that homeowners wouldn't read, wouldn't question, and wouldn't compare notes. They never expected someone to trace the paper trail far enough to expose the foundation itself. By the time the next certified letter arrived, the dynamic had shifted. The HOA still believed it held control, but its mistakes were piling up, and each one made the truth harder to hide. What began as a personal dispute was turning into something far larger, something that threatened the association's carefully constructed image, and that was when I realized the HOA's greatest mistake wasn't the fines, the threats, or the intimidation. It was underestimating how dangerous transparency could be to a system built on silence. The second chapter began quietly, not with confrontation, but with confirmation. Public records told a story the HOA never intended anyone to read. Financial reports revealed unexplained expenditures and contracts awarded without competitive bidding. Payments flowed to companies with personal ties to board members. Maintenance projects billed to homeowners had either been inflated or never completed at all. This wasn't mismanagement. It was corruption disguised as community governance. Formal complaints triggered official attention. Requests for documents became legally enforceable rather than optional. The same association that once ignored emails now scrambled to respond. Within deadlines it could no longer control. Silence, once their strongest weapon, became evidence against them. Word spread quickly. Homeowners compared notices and discovered identical violations punished differently. Others realized the rules used against them had never been approved. Fear gave way to anger, and anger gave way to action. The association's power trip had relied on isolation, and now that isolation was gone, in an attempt to regain control, the HOA sent out a carefully worded announcement acknowledging administrative oversights. Fines were quietly reduced. Policies were temporarily suspended. The language shifted, but the damage was done. Too many eyes were watching now. Investigators confirmed multiple violations of state law, including improper elections, unauthorized rule changes, and financial misconduct. The board's authority was suspended pending review. Meetings were placed under supervision. For the first time, homeowners saw the HOA not as an untouchable force, but as an organization accountable to laws it had long ignored. The fallout was swift. Board members resigned one by one, each citing personal reasons that convinced no one. A court-appointed administrator stepped in to stabilize operations. All enforcement actions were frozen. Refunds were issued for improperly collected fines. Elections were scheduled under strict oversight. The neighborhood changed almost overnight. The tension that had lingered for years dissolved. People spoke openly again. Trust, once broken, didn't instantly return, but awareness replaced ignorance. The community understood now how easily authority could be abused when left unchecked. Standing outside my home one evening, I realized how much had shifted. This wasn't just about winning a dispute, it was about exposing a system that thrived on fear and silence. The HOA's power trip ended not because it was challenged loudly, but because it was challenged correctly. Their massive mistake was assuming no one would look closely. By pushing too far, they triggered the very scrutiny that dismantled them. Publicly, what they tried to bury became impossible to hide. The association survived in name only, stripped of unchecked authority and rebuilt under transparency. Rules were rewritten with homeowner input. Financial disclosures became mandatory. Oversight replaced intimidation. The lesson was clear and lasting. Homeownership doesn't end at the front door. Rights must be understood, questioned, and organizations created to manage communities can easily become instruments of control when accountability disappears. In the end, there were no dramatic confrontations or shouted victories. Just records, persistence, and the refusal to be The HOA's corruption wasn't exposed by force, but by truth. And it all started with one notice, one power trip, and one massive mistake they could never undo.